So the question is, where are you when you don't know where you are? I would say you're as close to reality as you're ever going to get when you are where you don't know where you are. And it's a bit much to take. And so people do everything they can all the time to make sure that the amount of reality that they have to come into contact with is delimited, filtered, and controlled. And we do that a bunch of different ways. We do that by organizing our beliefs in a certain way. That's terror management theory, fundamentally, right? Is that we organize our beliefs to shield ourselves from the reality of death. But we also organize our societies and our interpersonal relationships in such a way that we're shielded from death and so that we don't kill each other. And that has nothing to do with the utility of our beliefs in keeping the fear of death at bay. That's something that keeps the lights on and keeps this room warm when it's minus 20 outside. You think, well, here we are in this room and everyone knows what this room is, but it's not the same room if someone pulls out a pistol. It is really not the same place. And insofar as you think it's the same place, all that means is you're in real trouble, because it is not the same place. And so things can shift and change on you all the time, and in fact, to some degree, that's what time is doing. Okay, now, you remember the Osiris-Horus story, right? Okay, so there's Osiris, and Osiris is like, he's like the way things are. Now, there's a problem with that. He's like the map. There's a problem with that, is because the territory is always moving around, and so your map is never quite up to date, and so you can't rely on Osiris. You know that if you have one of those Google GPSs. Now and then they've taken me like to the middle of parking lots. You know, because the map thinks there's something there that isn't there, and there's nothing there. Maybe it's not updated. It wasn't Google, it was the thing that I was using in my car, because Google tends not to do that. But anyways, when the map isn't an accurate representation of the territory, an accurate pragmatic representation of the territory, then you can't navigate in it, and you're going to end up places that you don't understand. So the map gets out of date as the territory changes, so Osiris isn't good enough. The old map never works. It kind of works. And so you need Horus, because Horus is the thing that updates the map. It's like he's attending to those things, he's attending to those locales where the map is no longer valid, and updating it. Now, back to the idea about the things that attract your attention. It was either Binswanger or Boss, and unfortunately I don't remember which because I always confuse the two, existential phenomenological psychologists. And one of them, and I think it was Binswanger, said that reality shines forth, and the other one said, no, no, no. You lay a structure on reality, and the structure is what allows things to shine forth. And it doesn't matter, because you can just put those two theories together. There's something shining in the background, and you have a map that's a filter, and now and then there's a little hole in the map, and you can see the things that are shining through. Those are the things that attract your interest. Now imagine that you have a part of your brain that likes the map and just follows it, and I would say that's the automatized part of you, right? That's the part that's running on algorithms. So when you know a territory, when you're driving home the 100th time, you hardly have to pay attention at all. Because you've paid attention 100 times before. You know the route. You can rely on your pre-existent skills. They're built into you, literally. You've built neurological models of the landscape and the reaction. So here's an example. You know, before you can be a London taxi cab driver, you have to take a test. It takes like 4 years of studying. You have to know the city. And London's a big city. It isn't that you just have to know how to navigate in it, you actually have to sort of memorize the whole damn city. And so they've done scanning studies on people who've done the London cab training process, and what they find is that from the beginning of the 4-year, 3-year, whatever it is, training period to the end, their hippocampi grow. So, why? Well, because they have a big map. It's a bloody big map. It's all of London. You know, so the reason I'm saying that is you don't want to be thinking that when you've learned a route that you've just updated your psyche. You know what I mean? It's not just your abstract conscious mind that knows something. You've built the damn thing right into your body. You've built neural structures that correspond in some manner, some minimal manner, to the territory itself. And so then you can just run on automatic. And you want to run on automatic because, you know, I bet you've experienced this. You go somewhere for the first time, it's much longer the first time than it is the third time. Have you experienced that? How common is that experience? Put up your hands if you've experienced that. Okay, has people not experienced that? Okay, so I think the reason that is that you're doing a lot more there's a lot more neural events going on when you're doing it the first time. And part of your time perception is how many neural events are occurring per fragment of time. And so if a lot of them are happening per fragment of time, the time is going to seem longer. If hardly any of them are happening, it's like you hardly even notice the time. And why should you? There's no point in it. You're running on automatized machinery. So I'll say, well, that's Osiris. Then you have another piece of machinery. That's Horus. That's the thing that attends to those things that the map hasn't covered. And I would say, this is a Jungian idea primarily, although of course Jung extracted it out from all these ancient stories. Where things shine through the map is what attracts your attention. And that tells you whether or not you know it. The map has a hole there. You should fix it. Now, as you fix the hole in the map, you also fix yourself. Because you're building yourself out of information. Now, a corollary of that is, you have a map of the past, your past, and there's holes in it everywhere. And you can tell where those holes are because you can't forget about them. So the hole might be, you got bullied in grade 3 and you were traumatized. It's like, that's a hole in the map. Because you're still that person, unless you've repaired the hole, you're still that person. And that's never going to stop shining through for you unless you go back there and repair it. And what that also means is, imagine that hole, what shines through is horror, in part. It's hard on you, but it's also information. It's information. And the information there would be, how the hell do you deal with a bully? And so maybe you go back and you think about that. You really think through it. And you think, well, how did I get bullied and why did I get bullied? And exactly what it is about human nature that allows someone to be malevolent like that. And what should a person do to defend themselves against that possibility? And how can I become that person? It's like, poof, hole fixed. And what that means in some sense is that you've extracted out the residual information from that occurrence that you hadn't been able to or refused to process when you first had the experience. Now, in your brain, being no stupid thing, it's really concerned about this map. It cares about the map and where things shine through, because it doesn't want you falling through holes. And so, every place that what you don't know shines through is either something you have to attend to now, or something you can't forget. And what you do when you forget something, you don't actually forget it. You learn that it doesn't mean anything anymore because you've mastered it. That's what it is to forget. A traumatized person can't forget because they haven't mastered the territory that constitutes the locale of the trauma. You know, so you might say, well, let's say you're a soldier and you did something seriously brutal in Afghanistan or Vietnam, like seriously brutal. And you can't forget it. What do you do about that? Well, you know, I've dealt with people who've been traumatized in one way or another, sometimes by things they've done and sometimes by things that have happened to them. In order for people to deal with a traumatic event that involved malevolence, they have to develop a theory of good and evil. Because it's the evil and the malevolence that traumatizes them. And I think I've told you already, I had 2 clients who suffered post-traumatic stress disorder because of the way someone looked at them. Once, it was only one time the person looked at them. The other, it was repeated. This is a person who'd been bullied. And it took me a while to figure out that she had post-traumatic stress disorder. But she kept talking about the look on his face. Well, it was an archetypal look, right? It's the look of pure evil, insofar as someone can manifest that look. It's like, you can manifest that look. You know, and if you're a soldier, and you've manifested that spirit, that might be enough to knock out part of your consciousness, right? That's what happens to Horus when he encounters Seth. It's like, uh-oh, eyes open, you encounter something like that, you lose an eye. You pay a price, right? It can damage you because it's so deep and terrible. One of the things Jung said about human beings as such, and this is the adversarial part of the person. There's a heroic side and there's an adversarial side. He said, all of your moral flaws are like, they're like there's an abyss underneath them. That's where the image of hell comes from. Everything you do that's wrong, morally wrong, is associated with the abyss if you look into it deeply enough. One of the things Jung thought was that if you, and this is also the same with the phenomenologists, by the way, and it's also the same with Viktor Frankl, and I believe it's also the same with Alexander Solzhenitsyn when he wrote about how to stand up against totalitarian states. It's like, you have to maintain an honest relationship with the things that attract your attention. You can't ignore them. If you ignore them, well, what happens? Well, we've already figured that out. You don't fix the holes in your map, and then whenever you wander on that territory, you're going to fall right through,